we are starting another session to discuss our MOOC paper, and I must extend my sincere gratitude to CS Sri Lanka for hosting this session to discuss the MOOC paper and also for calling me over here as a resource person. And it is the requirement of the hour now, because the most of the students, their minds are filled with doom and gloom that they can't do these online exams, but they have no option but to give it up. And their mindsets have sunk into such a deeper status of depression because of the ongoing situations, and most of them are thinking of giving up the exams without doing online. But my sincere advice and the request, humble request, is not to give it up, and you need to adjust yourself to the changing environment and the situations and to do it somehow or other and to see how successful it will be. And this is another initiative of CS Sri Lanka to support you, to assist you in all the possible ways to make you sit for the exam. And this is the FRG paper, CL2 FRG paper. The paper looks very I can't say easy, but it's if somebody has done a fair job, you can easily get through this paper. I wish your paper will be something similar to this, and the passing rate will be absolutely good. Why this is not so hard, and you can finish it within 3 hours. It's manageable. It's very fair by all the students who have done a fair job. You can easily get 50 marks. So we will get on with section 1, where there are MCQ questions. The paper is comprising of 3 sections: section 1, section 2 and section 3. Section 1 is the section where there are MCQ questions. As we know, from the very beginning there are 10 MCQ questions, and we will start with that. Question number 1. Select the most correct answer for question number 1.1 to 1.10. On 1st April 2019, Eagle Power PLC commenced the operations of a nuclear power plant. The plant was due to be active for 10 years until 31st March 2029. When it would be decommissioned on 1st April 2029, the cost of decommissioning plant were estimated to be 40 million. The cost of decommissioning the plant were estimated to be 40 million rupees in 10 years time. Eagle Power PLC considers that a discount rate of 10% is appropriate for the calculations of a present value of the decommissioning liability. What is the total charge to the statement of profit or loss in respect of the decommissioning for the year ended 31st March 2020? Right. Now the decommissioning cost is estimated to be 40 million rupee. This is not the present value, that's what you need to think of. This is the estimated value to be incurred in 10 years ahead. So as you include this into the value or to the cost of the plant, it's not the value given to be included to the cost of the plant, and what you must include to the cost of the plant should be its present value. In order for us to calculate the present value, we are given the discounting rate. It is 10%. So let us work out on the present value. It is 40 million divided by 1.1 to the power 10. 40 million, let me take the figures in thousand, divided by 1.1 to the power 10. So that is 15,421.7. 15,421.7. So this is what you should add to the cost of the asset right now. As you decide the cost of the plant right now, this is what you should include to the cost of the plant. And the cost of the plant is not given, so that is not important. And apart from the purchase price of the plant, also you need to include 15,421.7. At the same time, you need to create a provision as well. 15,421.7 is credited to the provision account, decommissioning provision. So, what does the examiner want us to give? What is the total charge to the statement of profit or loss in respect of decommissioning for the year ended 31st? It has to be 30th April 2020 or 30th April 2020, and you know this is the present value. With the passage of time, with the passing of time, you need to keep adding 10% interest over 10 years time in such a way that you transform this present value back to the future value over 10 years time. So, how do we do that? You need to go on adding 10% interest. How much should be the 10% interest? It is 1,542.1, and this is what you should debit to profit and loss and credit to the provision account. So, the answer has to be C, 1.54. 1.54 should be the answer. Second one, during the current year, an entity had in place 100 million of 6% loan finance and 200 million 8% loan finance. It constructed a new factory that cost 60 million rupees, and this was funded out of the existing loan finance. The factory took 9 months to complete. To the nearest 1000, what borrowing cost should be capitalized? And you know the standard is very simple, it is very straightforward rather. It has to be LKS 23 borrowing cost, and this is a qualifying asset. Why? It has taken a substantial time period to get ready for use. 9 months seems to be substantial. There is no hard and fast rule to measure what the substantial time period is, but in practice now it is considered to be 1 year, but there can be ups and downs either way, pluses and minus either way. So, even 9 months can be considered to be a substantial time period. Then the cost incurred for the construction of the asset is 60 million, and the examiner has not been so specific about where the 60 million proceeds were taken from, whether it was taken from 200 million loan or whether it was taken from 100 million loan. And maybe this entire proceeds of 100 million and 200 million would have been taken into a common bank account where the funds were drawn as and when the requirements arose to construct the asset. So, now we have taken 60 million not only from the 100 million bank loan, also from 200 million bank loan, and each bank loan has their different interest rates. So, in calculating the borrowing cost to be capitalized as part of the cost of the plant, which interest rate to be used? It is neither 6% nor 8%, it has to be a combined average rate, and that is what you need to calculate. And very simple calculation, simply for 100 million, let us calculate interest, that is at 6% should be 6 million, and for 200 million, what is the rate? 8% should be 16 million. So, altogether interest for the two loans have to be 22 million. But it does not mean that we should capitalize the entire 22, no. Then we will calculate an average rate. How to calculate the average rate? It is just a matter of dividing 22 million over 300 million. It is as if you have taken a single loan of 300 million for which you have paid 22 million worth of interest. That is how you need to settle your mindset. That is as if you have taken a single bank loan of 300 million where the interest has been 22 million. If the loan value was 300 and if the interest you paid was 22, what would have been the interest rate? 22 divided by 300, and that is 7.33%. Now, that is the rate that should apply on the proceeds utilized for the construction of the asset to determine the amount of borrowing cost to be capitalized. Out of 300 million total proceeds, how much has been utilized for the construction of the asset? That was only 60 million. 60 million into this rate 7.33, and this 7.33 is the annual rate, and the time taken to complete the construction of the machine was just 9 months, and then what you must do is to divide it by 12 and to multiply it by 9. It has to be 3.3 million, so the answer has to be A. So, the answer for second part of the question should be A. Then third one, which of the following cannot be recognized as an intangible non-current asset in ABC's consolidated statement of financial position at 31st March 2020? And I think you will pay the required attention to the question. So, the examiner is asking you to think of the intangibles to be recognized not into the individual financial statements of a company, it has to be consolidated financial statements. Certain intangibles that cannot appear in the individual balance sheet of a company can appear as intangibles in the consolidated balance sheet. That is where the problem is. Now, sometimes intangibles like brand names may not be intangible assets in an individual balance sheet, but do become intangible assets in a consolidated balance sheet. So, that is what you need to be careful about. If not, you will miss out certain important things. A. ABC spent 5 million rupees in developing a new type of product. In March 2020, management worried that it would be too expensive to finance product development. The finances to complete the project received from a donor in November 2019. So, this is kind of a development cost, and in March 2020 management worried that it would be too expensive to finance product development. The finances to complete the project received from a donor in November 2019, and there is some a small issue in the question. It has not been an effective way of giving the contents in the question. The question would have been read like this: the finances required to complete the project were received from a donor in November 2019, right. So, then 5 million can be taken as an intangible asset under internally generated intangibles, and also you can include that into the consolidated balance sheet, no problem. B. ABC purchased a subsidiary during the year. During the fair value exercise, it was found that the subsidiary had a brand name with an estimated value of 900,000 rupees. 900,000 rupees, but had not been recognized by the subsidiary as it was internally generated. So, B, no problem, can be also an intangible asset. C. ABC purchased a brand name from a competitor on 1st April 2020 for rupees 650,000. That also can be an intangible asset. Normally, internally generated brand name cannot be intangible assets, cannot be internally generated. Why? you cannot measure it reliably. Internally generated brand cannot be intangibles because you can't measure the cost reliably. Since it was purchased from another outside party, how much have you paid? 650,000 rupees. The cost is reliably measurable, no issue. So let it to be an intangible asset. ABC spent 2 million rupees during the year on the development of a new product. After management concluded it would be viable in November 19, the product is being launched on the market on 1st March 2020 and is expected to be profitable. So that also can be an intangible asset, that is also part of development. I made a mistake in reading the question. They are asking not the intangible, they are asking what cannot be an intangible asset. Which of the following cannot be recognized as an intangible asset? Let me go to, now all the four seem to be like intangible asset, but I have a doubt in A. Let me go through A once again. ABC spent 5 million in developing a new type of product. In March 2020, management worried that it would be too expensive to finance the product development. The finances to complete the project received from a donor in November 2019. Right. Now there, if you recognize development cost as an intangible asset, you must make sure that there are 6 requirements. To be satisfied, and you must make sure that all the 6 requirements are satisfied. Here we have a small hitch. What is it? In March 2020, management worried that it would be too expensive to finance the product development. What do you mean by it being too expensive? It being too expensive means the cost required to complete the development project will be higher than the expected benefits. The cost required to complete the development phase of the product seems to be higher than the required expected benefits. And also it looks that you are running short of money to complete the finance. Now for you to capitalize development, because you must make sure that you have adequate financial and non-financial resources. Here the company is like running out of money to complete the development phase of the project. So what is very unlikely of being an intangible asset should be A. So the answer has to be A. .4 Gamage Rubber PLC has a 75% investment in Tangol Plantation Limited, which in turn has 60% investment in Green Wind Limited. Lasanthi Pereira is the finance director of Gamage Rubber PLC and her husband is the non-executive director of ACA Management PLC. To which companies is she related? So once again the question would have been more specific. Without it being like which companies is she related, the question would have been like to which company is she considered to be a related party. Right. So the question has been from LKS 24 and let us look at the contents to identify the companies to which she can be considered to be a related party. Gamage Rubber PLC. Gamage Rubber PLC has 75% investment in Tangol Plantation. Tangol Plantation, which in turn has 60% investment in Green Wind Limited. Green Wind Limited, 60%. Right. So there are two subsidiary companies of Gamage Rubber PLC. Both Tangol Plantations and Greenwind Plantations are subsidiary companies of Gamage Rubber PLC, and this is where she works, and she is the finance director. Finance director can be considered to be a member of the key management, and executive director, a member of the key management, is a related party to the entity concerned. So, the finance director is a related party to the entity where she works as a director, and if you have carefully scrutinized LKS 24, you would have observed that the directors of a company are related parties not only to the company to which she is a director, also she is a related party to the subsidiary companies of the company to which she is a director. Now, this finance director is now considered to be a related party to all these three companies. Why the directors of a parent company are considered to be related not only to the company to which she is a director, also to the other all subsidiary companies. Then her husband, close family member, and he has been non-executive director of ACA Management Limited. You have studied in LKS 24 that a member of the key management of a company has close family members, and the close family members are also considered to be related party to the entity being concerned, and those close family members also can have entities where they work as directors. Now, even finance director, this girl, she is related not only to Gamage Rubber PLC, she is related to ACA Management Limited as well. Why? This is a company where her husband works as a non-executive director. The finance director of this company is a close family member of this non-executive director of this company, and she is related to this company as well under LKS 24. So, she is the key person whom we talk about, and she is considered to be related party for all these four companies. Now, so the answer has to be what? Gamage Rubber PLC not, Gamage Rubber PLC and ACA Management PLC not, Gamage Rubber PLC, ACA Management PLC and Tangol Plantations Limited not, Gamage Rubber PLC, ACA Management PLC, Greenwind Limited and Tangol Plantation Limited. That has to be the answer. So, the answer has to be D. So, we are moving on to the fifth one. Which of the following could be classified as development expenditure in 3M Holdings statements of financial position as at 31st March 2020 according to LKS 30 intangible assets? A. 600,000 rupees spent on developing a prototype and testing a new type of propulsion system. The project needs further work on it as the system is currently not viable. You know, for a development cost to be an intangible asset, there are 6 requirements to be looked into. Among those 6 is the requirement of there has to be a technical viability. There has to be a technical viability. Now, there is no technical viability here, technical suitability. Technical suitability. The propulsion system, though you develop, does not have the potential of working to the requirement as we expected. So, then if it does not have the technical viability, you cannot recognize that development cost as an intangible asset. So, it is now out. B, a payment of rupees 550,000 to a research institution to research new environmentally friendly building techniques. Is not that do you do the researches on your own and we will get someone else to do the researches on our behalf. So, actually the people who do the researches are not ourselves, it is an outside party. So, as a result, we are receiving a service from another outside party without we conducting the researches on our own. So, that does not become an intangible asset. Anyway, research cost does not become development and does not become intangibles either. So, even B has to be out. Rupees 5 million developing an electric car, but the product will not be launched as this project is expected to make losses. And that does not have the potential of being able to make does not have the potential of being able to generate economic benefit in the future. Why? Losses, the cost you incur to develop the product will be much more higher, way more higher than the expected benefits, and then we will end up incurring massive and thundering losses. So, if does not generate economic benefits enough, even that cannot be an intangible, that development has not to be an intangible. So, even C has to be out. D, 300,000 developing a special type of new packaging for a new energy efficient light bulb. The packaging is expected to reduce 3M Holdings distribution cost by 150,000 rupees per year, and that seems to generate economic benefits, and there seems to have the technical viability as well, and the cost can be measured reliably, and even without giving that to an outside external market, it looks like they can use it internally. So, they can generate economic benefits. Apparently, all the required conditions are satisfied. So, why not it becomes an intangible? So, that is what the answer has to be. Answer has to be D. So, only the last item fits into the requirements of LKS 38 to be recognized into intangible assets. So, we are moving on to number 6. According to SLFRS 5, non-current assets held for sale and discontinued operations, which of the following represents criteria for an asset to be classified as held for sale? Available for immediate sale in its present condition. Yes, it has to be a condition. Sale is highly probable. That again has to be another requirement. The sale is expected to be completed within the next 3 months. That is wrong. It is expected to be completed within 1 year's time from the date of the classification. The asset is being marketed at a reasonable price. That is also a requirement. So, first is correct, the second is correct, the fourth is correct. So, what is the answer? The answer has to be A wrong, B wrong, C has to be the answer. The answer is C. So, we are moving on to question number 7. Faithful representation is a fundamental characteristic of useful information within the conceptual framework for financial reporting. Which of the following treatments applies the principles of faithful representation? A, reporting a transaction based on its legal status rather than its economic substance. And that is absolutely wrong, and we know right from your childhood that as you bring the events and transactions into the financial records and statements, what it should be based on is not the legality of the transaction, but should be its economic reality, that is called the substance. Now, for the financial statements to faithfully represent, you need to demonstrate the economic reality of the effects of events and transactions without just merely sticking to the legality of the transaction. So, the first is anyway wrong. Excluding a subsidiary from consolidation because its activities are not compatible with those of the rest of the group. That once again is wrong, because even in SLFRS 10 we have studied the fact that a parent company cannot exclude a particular subsidiary company from the process of being consolidated just on the mere fact of the business of a subsidiary company being different from the business of the parent company. Even if the businesses are dissimilar, are not compatible to each other, still you have got to consolidate. So, the parent company is a business like a bank, and subsidiary company will be in the business of pumping air to the parachutes and balloons. Still, you have to consolidate. So, even the second one is wrong. Recording the whole of the net proceeds from the issue of a loan note which is potentially convertible to fixed number of equity shares is a liability. As a liability, that is wrong. If it is a fixed number, it has to be an equity item, not a liability. Allocating part of the sales proceeds of a motor vehicle to interest received even though it was sold with interest free finance, that is the answer. Now, let me explain the fourth one. Say we have a vehicle which we are going to sell, and we will complete the sale transaction not right now, we will complete that in 1 year's time. But we are receiving the total sales proceeds right now. So, if it is not an absolute sale transaction, the proceeds you received right now cannot be the sales proceeds. What is it? It's like you receiving, it's like you having received a loan. So, what should be the loan to be settled in 1 year's time? 1 million rupees. So, this has to include the capital value of the loan plus interest value. Then, how much will you credit to loan account right now? Not this 1 million rupee, it has to be the present value. So, partly goes to finance, partly goes to loan. So, that is how we should do the account based on faithful representation. So, the answer has to be D. We are moving on to 1.8, which the following statement is correct. An asset is recognized if there is a probable inflow of economic benefits attached to it. An asset is derecognized only when an entity loses the control of it. That is wrong. Apart from you derecognizing assets where we are losing the control, also there are some other instances where we are derecognizing assets. We are also derecognizing assets when an asset stops generating economic benefits. So, the second one is wrong. Third one, a liability may be measured at value in use. That is wrong. We are not using value in use for the measurement of liabilities. Items of expenses are recognized directly in equity unless an SLFRS considers recognition in OCI to be more relevant. It has to be the other way, not how it is given. So, even D is wrong. So, the correct answer should be A. An asset is recognized if there is a probable inflow of economic benefits attached to it. We are moving on to question number 1.8, which the following statement is correct. We are moving on to 1.9 rather. Which of the following are all guiding principles of an integrated report according to the IR framework, and you need to remember it. The IR guideline says the integrated reporting has to be on the concepts of consistency, comparability and materiality. So, the answer has to be C, just a matter of remembering that, please. 1.10, PPLC acquired 80% of SPLC. SPLC's 2 million shares on 1st May 19 for a consideration of 500 million rupees. At that day, the carrying amount of the net assets of SPLC was 400 million rupees and the market value of a share in SPLC was 400 rupees. At the date of acquisition, SPLC had 20 million rupees exposed contingent liability, which is fair valued to be 8 million rupees. What goodwill arises on the acquisition if the NCI is measured at fair value? Let us do a small working on that. Consideration is 500 million. Carrying value of the net assets minus net assets 400 million. Market value of a share in SPLC were 400 million, 400 rupees rather, and that can be used to determine the fair value of NCI. Let me take here NCI at fair value. The number of shares is 2 million, so a P company acquired only 80% and the balance 20% is held by NCI. So, that is how many shares? 2 million into 20% is 400,000 shares into 400, that is the market price of a share, and it has to be 160 million. At the date of acquisition of SPLC had 20 million exposed contingent liability, which is fair valued to 8 million. And let me bring the contingent liability and it has to be deducted from the net assets value 8 million, and what should be the goodwill? So, let me work it out. The total consideration here should be 660 and this is 392. 392 is deducted from 660 to calculate the goodwill. So, the goodwill has to be 268. So, the answer has to be B. So, we are moving on to question number 2. Question number 2 part A. Cola operates in the carbonated soft drink industry. The Cola brand is highly respected and as a result the carbonated soft drink manufactured by Cola receives extensive demand from both locally and internationally. The brand is internally generated and in accordance with LKZ 38 intangible assets is not recognized in Cola's financial statements. Required discuss the extent to which the accounting treatment of the Cola brand is consistent with the conceptual framework of financial reporting. Right. Now, the question is not from LKS 38. So, you need to provide the required answer to the question from the conceptual framework. Discuss the extent to which the accounting treatment of the Cola brand is consistent with the conceptual framework of financial reporting. So, there is no question about whether it should be recognized or not recognized. It is as clear as crystal that this brand name cannot be recognized as an intangible to the statement of financial position. So, you need to substantiate and you need to assert kind of confirmation to be given from the conceptual framework justifying the decision of the entity to not to recognize brand name as an intangible asset. So, you need to justify their decision not to recognize the brand name as an intangible asset from the conceptual framework. So, you need to relate this non-recognition of intangible asset to the conceptual framework. Now, if you get back to conceptual framework, where you recognize an intangible asset or rather an asset, you need to look at three aspects. What are the three aspects? First, you need to look at the definition of an asset. Definition of an asset, what does it say? Where you recognize an asset into the balance sheet, the conceptual framework says it has to comply with the definition of an asset. How did you define an asset in the conceptual framework? An asset is an economic resource arising from the past events, and the entity should control that. That is the definition. So, you need to see whether all these requirements in the definitions are included in this brand name. So, there is no issue. The brand name is within the control of the entity, it is an economic resource, it will generate the cash flows to the business, and that is within the control, it has arisen as a result of a past event. Then, after recognizing this as an asset into the balance sheet, the balance sheet has to provide faithful, it has to be a faithful representation. It has to be a faithful representation. And also you must make sure that after recognizing the brand name as an asset or intangible asset, it has to provide relevant information. And that is where the problem is, and let me explain that part in particular. How do we provide relevant information? And after recognizing something as an asset into the balance sheet, if there is a material uncertainty about the future cash inflows from the asset to the business, it does not provide relevant information. Now, say for an example, we have filed a case against someone asking some compensations from a supplier for providing us defective goods. The amount of compensations we are claiming is 100 million rupees. The case is just filed, still in the process of being arbitrated. Now, you cannot recognize 100 million rupees as a receivable to the balance sheet. If you do it, you are not providing relevant information. Why? There is a material uncertainty of the future cash flows. And also, if there is material uncertainty of the measurement, then again there are problems. Now, here you must make sure that all the requirements are satisfied in recognizing what are the requirements. It has to conform to the definition of assets in the conceptual framework. It has to provide faithful information. It has to provide relevant information. How do we make sure that they provide faithful representation and relevant information? If there are material uncertainty of the amounts, and if there are material uncertainty about the future cash inflows, it does not provide faithful information, and also it does not provide relevant information either. So, what is the issue here? The brand is internally generated, and in accordance with LKS 38 intangible, as it is not recognized in the balance sheet. If it is internally generated, what is the issue? There is a material measurement uncertainty. There is a material measurement uncertainty. If there is a material measurement uncertainty, we have a problem of not being able to provide faithful information and relevant information. So, that is how you support it from the conceptual framework. answer එක පොඩ්ඩක්. So, you can see the answer given by CS Sri Lanka. The brand is an economic resource controlled by cola. It has the potential to bring economic benefits because of the exposure that cola branded carbonated soft drinks receive. Despite meeting the definition of an element, the brand is not recognized in the financial statements. However, the conceptual framework states that element should only be recognized if this provides relevant information or a faithful representations of the asset or liability. If there is a high degree of measurement uncertainty, then recognitions may not provide faithful representation. The cost of an internally generated brand cannot be reliably measured. This is because the cost of setting up and developing the brand cannot be separated from the operating cost of the business. The fair value of a brand is also very difficult to determine because brands are unique. Thus, it would seem that accounting treatment of the brand, as Pelkey stated, intangible as it is not consistent with the conceptual framework. Right. So, that is what we discussed now. So, we can move on to part B. Part B of the question, Tesla has a defined benefit pension scheme. Company prepares financial statements to 31st March each year. The following information is relevant for the year ended 31st March 19. The present value of pension obligation on 31st March 19 was 119 million and the fair value of the plan assets was 55 million rupees on 31st March 18. The net obligation was 50 million. Comprising the present value of the plan obligation stated at 100 million rupees together with plan assets stated at fair value of 50 million rupees. The discount rate relevant to the net obligation was 10% and the actual return on plan assets for the year was 4 million rupees. The current service cost was 15 million rupees. At 31st March 19, Tesla granted additional benefits to those currently receiving benefits that are due to vest over the next 4 years. And which have a present value of 5 million rupees on that date, they were not allowed for in the original actuarial assumptions. During the year, Tesla made pension contributions of 8 million rupees into the scheme and the scheme paid pension benefits in the year amounting to 6 million rupees. Required explain the accounting treatment of the Tesla's pension schemes for the year to 31st March 19 together with the relevant calculations. Now, we need to do the accounting for the pension assets and for the pension liability. So, this is liability and this is assets. Year end is 31st March. The present value of pension obligation on 31st March 19 was 119 million. That was the closing balance. Balance as at 31st March 19. Present value of pension obligation 119 million. So, let it be the closing balance. Fair value of plan assets 55 million. So, let it be the closing balance of plan assets. On 31st March 18, that is at the beginning of the year, the net obligation was 50 million. That is the net amount after setting off liabilities from the assets and vice versa, comprising the net present value of the plan obligation stated at 100 million. So, let me bring here the opening balances. Balance as at 1st April 18, liabilities were 100 million, assets were 50 million. So, you know as per case 19, liability should be measured at their present value and the assets are measured at fair value. So, the values given should be in accordance with the requirements. You need not to worry about it. Together with plan assets 50, the discount rate relevant to the net obligation was 10% and the actual return on plan assets for the year was 4 million. So, let me take it in a little while. The current service cost should go to profit and loss. Current service cost, debit to profit and loss and credit to the liability, that is by 15 million. At 31st March 19, Tesla granted additional benefits to those currently receiving benefits that are due to vest over the next 4 years and which have a present value of 5 million rupees. And if there were revisions to the final benefits amount, if additional benefits to be offered relating to the periods expired, to the periods that have passed already, we call it the past service cost. So, the past service cost as per the question should be 5 million rupees, and let me bring it here. Past service cost you debit to profit and loss and credit to the liability 5 million. And they were not allowed for in the original actuarial assumptions. During the year, Tesla made pension contributions of 8 million rupees. Contributions during the year. Contributions during the year 8 million. So, you can credit cash and debit to plan assets. And the scheme paid pension benefits in the year amounting to 6 million rupees. Benefits paid 6 million. So, you should deduct it from the plan assets as well as the liability 6 million. Right, and then we will recognize interest. Interest 10% should apply on the opening balances, 10 million to plan liabilities and 5 million to plan assets, 10% on 100 million opening and 10% on opening balance of plan assets 50 million. Now, there is another piece of information given saying that actual return on plan assets were 4 million. Then, if I were a student at the exam, even I would have had the same problem, and you will keep thinking whether to take 10% on 50 million opening balance or whether to put the actual return. If you bring here the actual return, there will be a problem and we are not falling in line with the requirements of LKS 90. Why? At the end, you should end up in calculating the actuarial gain and loss. What do you mean by the actuarial gain and loss? Actuarial gain and loss is the difference between what the actuary thought would happen and actually what has happened. That is what you mean by the actuarial gain. Now, say for an example, opening balance was 100 and the actuary thought the interest rate would be 10% all along, and then the closing balance should be 110 million rupees accordingly. And here you bring here 100, you bring here 110 closing balance, and if you bring the now the actual return has not been what the actuary thought would be, actual return has been 12 million. Actual return has been 12 million. Accordingly, closing balance cannot be 110, it has to be 112 million. Why? When the actual return goes up, the closing balance should also go up. Then if you bring here the actual return 12, can you calculate an actuarial gain? No, that figure goes missing. You can calculate the actuarial gain or loss, whatever, only if you calculate gain on opening balance of 100, and then only this missing figure 2 can be calculated, can be shown. So, as a result, what you must do is you should recognize interest income at 10% on the opening balance, and then only we can show from this accounts the difference between what the actuary thought would happen and what has actually happened. If not, actuarial gains and losses will go missing. So, I hope that part was clear, and then we will calculate actuarial gains and losses. Actuarial gains or losses, let us see how much they are. 100 plus 15 plus 5 minus 6 plus 10, 124, and the difference should be 5. This has to be a gain, and under assets 50 plus 8 plus 5 minus 6, and there should be a loss of 2 million, actuarial loss. What do they want us to do? Explain the accounting treatment of Tesla's pension scheme for the year to 31st March 2019. Advise the accounting treatment. How do we account for the current service cost? Current service cost has to be expensed to profit and loss immediately. How do we recognize the past service cost? The past service cost has to be recognized immediately, that should go to profit and loss. Contributions that will increase the plan assets, benefits paid that will reduce the plan assets and liabilities at the same time. Interest, net interest cost has to be recognized based on the opening balances at the interest rate of 10%, not the actual interest income or expenditure. So, we should recognize net amount of how much? 5 million rupees net amount expenditure. Actuarial gains and losses are recognized to other comprehensive income, and final balance of the pension scheme should be how much? Liability is 119, asset value is 55, closing balance should be 64, and you should recognize that into the balance sheet under non-current liability 64. That has to be your answer. And let us look at the answer of CS Sri Lanka. The discount rate is applied to the obligations and plan assets brought forward. The net interest component is 5 million rupees, and this is charged to profit and loss. The current year service cost together with the past service cost forms the service cost component. Past service cost is charged in full. usually when the scheme is amended rather than when the additional benefits vest. Therefore, current service cost of 15 million and past service cost of 5 million charged to profit or loss. To the extent that there has been a return on assets in excess of the amount identified by the applications of the discount rate to the fair value of the planned assets, this is part of the measurement component. That is what I explained. You need to include that into the actuarial gains and losses. Contributions paid into the plan during the year of 6 million rupees reduce the net obligations and plan assets. Benefits paid 8 million will reduce both the scheme assets and the scheme obligations. So, no impact on the net obligation. The statement of financial position has to show ₹64 million on 31st March 19. That is the answer for part B of question number 2. So, we are moving on to question number 3 now. Question number 3, part A. Solid Star PLC issued the following preference shares on 31st March 2020. First one, 2 million preference shares for 100 rupees each. Now, dividends are payable. SSP will redeem the preference shares in 5 years by issuing ordinary shares worth 200 rupees million. The exact number of ordinary shares issuable will be based on their fair value on 31st March 2025. Second one, 1 million preference shares for 100 rupees each. Now, dividends are payable. The preference shares will be redeemed in 2 years by issuing 10 million ordinary shares. 3 million preference shares for 100 rupees each. They are not mandatorily redeemable. A dividend is payable if and only if dividends are paid on ordinary shares. Required advise how the above preference shares are recognized in the financial statements of SSP. Now, if you watched our webinar videos on financial instruments, this question is just a peanut question. Now, in deciding how the preference shares are presented in the balance sheet, you need to take 2 factors into account. What are these 2 factors? You need to look at how the capital is repaid, also you need to look at how dividends are paid. This capital payment pattern and the dividend payment pattern will decide how you should show them in the balance sheet. And you cannot just look at one fact, you have to look at both at the same time for you to come and for you to arrive at the correct conclusions and to do everything right. But here the examiner has been very supportive and helpful, because the examiner has given the support to the fullest extent by highlighting only one part and by neutralizing the other category, other element. What does it say? First one, 1 million preference shares of 100 rupees each, no dividends are payable. So, you need not to think of dividend payment pattern, that is the support the examiner has given. I do not think the examiner has been so supportive. I mean the examiner has been given the fullest possible support to the fullest possible extent by making it so comfortable, and the examiner says you need not to think of dividends and you can completely conclude how the preference shares are presented only based on the capital repayment pattern. It says these preference shares will be redeemed in 5 years time by issuing ordinary shares worth 200 million. The exact number of ordinary shares issuable will be based on their fair value on 31st March 2024. Now, financial liabilities were defined in 4 different ways. Contractual obligation to deliver cash was the first one. A contract to exchange financial instruments under conditions that are potentially unfavorable to the entity was the second one. A non-derivative contract that is to be settled by issuing a variable number of the entity's own equity shares was the third one. So, here you should apply the third definition. Now, the preference shares will be redeemed in 5 years time by issuing as many ordinary shares as will be equal to 200 million rupees based on the fair value of a share in 5 years time. Just imagine the fair value of an ordinary share today being 200 rupees. Then how many shares to be issued? It will be 1 million shares. Now, it has to be clear for you all guys and gals that the number of shares to be issued in 5 years time will be proportionate, will be dependent and variable based on what the market price of a share will be. Every time the market price of a share changes, the number of shares to be issued will be changed. So, as a result, there is a contract to there is a contract, derivative contract that will be settled by issuing a variable number of the entities on equity instruments. So, this has to be a financial liability, right. Second one, 1 million preference shares of 100 rupees each, no dividends are payable. So, once again you need not to look at how the dividends are paid. The preference shares will be redeemed in 2 years by issuing 10 million ordinary shares. Preference shares will be redeemed in 2 years time by issuing exactly 10 million ordinary shares. What does it say? Once again the third definition is under financial liabilities. It is a contract that will be settled by issuing a fixed number of the entity's own equity shares. So, this is not a financial liability, this is an equity instrument. So, how are we going to present the preference shares now in the balance sheet? Let it to be an equity instrument in the balance sheet, not a financial liability. Third one, 3 million preference shares for 100 rupees each, they are not mandatorily redeemable. So, you need not to think of the capital payment, focus only on the dividend payment pattern now. A dividend is payable if and only if dividends are paid on ordinary shares. Now, what it says is, the examiner requires you to think that the dividend payment pattern to preference shareholders follows the same dividend payment pattern to ordinary shareholders. Now, do the ordinary shareholders receive dividends every year? No. Do the ordinary shareholders receive a fixed amount of a dividend? No. Ordinary shareholders are the true owners of the company because they get dividends only when the company makes profits and do not receive dividends when the company does not make profits. In other words, the true owners do have a characteristic of only receiving profits, not the, they do not take anything from the company when the company is at a loss. So, they are the true owners because they take only the profits. So, as a result, here even the preference shareholders do receive dividends only when the company makes profits. It is not a fixed dividend, it is not paid every year. The company pays dividends to preference shareholders only when the company makes profits. It is not a fixed dividend. Why? The dividend payment pattern is exactly similar to the dividend payment pattern to ordinary shareholders. So, as a result, these dividends can be like participative dividends, and they have what characteristics? The true owners and equity characteristics, and let the preference shares to be equity instruments in the statement of financial positions. That is how you should answer for that part, and let us look at the answer of CS Sri Lanka. The definition of a financial liability includes any contract that may be settled in a variable number of the entities on equity instruments. Therefore, a contract that requires the entity to deliver as many of the entities on equity instruments as are equal in value to a certain amount should be treated as debt. SSP must redeem the first set of preference shares by issuing ordinary shares equal to the value of 250 million. The rupees 200 million is received from the preference share issue should be classified as a liability in the statement of financial position. Second one, 1 million preference shares, a contract that will be settled by the entity delivering a fixed number of its own equity instrument is an equity instrument. SSP will redeem the preference share issue with a fixed number of the ordinary shares. Therefore, 100 million rupees from the preference share issue should be classified as equity in the statement of financial position. 3 million preference shares, a financial liability exists if there is a contractual obligation to deliver cash or another financial asset. There is no obligation for SSP to repay the instrument. Dividends are only payable if they are also paid on ordinary shares. There is no obligation to pay dividends on ordinary shares, so there is no obligations to pay dividends on these preference shares as well. The instrument is not a financial liability. The proceeds of 100 million received from the preference share issue should be classified as equity in the statement of financial position, right. Then we will look at question number 3. Part B, Lasanthi PLC purchased a new financial asset on 31st March 2020. The asset is a corporate debenture that will mature in 4 years. Lasanthi PLC purchased debt instruments with the intention of holding them to maturity. However, company may sell some investments if cash flow deteriorated beyond acceptable levels. The bond pays a market rate of interest to the CFO is not confident as to whether this financial asset can be categorized, measured at amortized cost required. Advise the CFO on how the debentures will be measured in financial statements of Lasanthi PLC for the year ended 31st March 2020. For a financial asset to be measured under amortized cost, you need to look at few criteria. And first and foremost, you need to see whether it is passing SPPI test. What is SPPI test? Solely the payment of principal and interest. Right. Now, that includes 3 characteristics. The future cash flows to be received from the financial asset should include solely, exclusively the principal plus interest. For a financial asset to be measured at amortized cost, the objective of the business model should be only to collect the contractual cash flows, not to collect the sales proceeds from a sale transaction. For you to categorize a financial asset measured at amortized cost, make sure that the objectives of the business model of the instrument is to collect only the contractual cash flows, not to collect the sales proceeds from a sale transaction. And contractual cash flow should be the cash flows of principal and interest exclusively and cannot include anything else. And then you must make sure that the contractual terms specify the dates to the contractual cash flows. This investment in debentures of another company matures in how many years time? That will mature in 4 years time. So, the contractual terms specify the dates to the contractual cash flows, right. And the interest should include the characteristics of interest. What do you mean by the characteristics of interest? You know, the components of interest can include only 3 things. What are the 3 things? It has to include the opportunity cost, has to include the inflation, has to include the risk. Apart from that, there can be some profit margins being included by the issuer. So, that is a different story. Now, the examiner has been pretty clear on the facts given. He says the interest is equal to the market interest rate. So, the market interest rate can include only the inflation plus opportunity cost and sometimes risk if it is required. So, the interest is including the required components, contractual terms specify the dates to contractual cash flows, and they are receiving only the principal plus interest. So, this investment is passing SPPI test. But what is problematic here? If I were a student, I would have had the same problems. It says the company sells the investments if the credit quality deteriorates. Credit quality deteriorates. What does it say? Now, your intention in the business model is to hold on to the investments over 4 years to collect the contractual cash flows. And for you to be able to collect the contractual cash flows, the investee must be hale and hearty. If the investee will be bankrupt, if the investee will be in a financial difficulty and a mess, and you will not be able to collect the contractual cash flows. So, this investor seems to be in a continuous assessment of the credit worthiness and the credit quality of the investee, and they keep a close eye on the investee to see whether the investee will be bankrupt or not, in a way that we will not have a problem of being able to collect the contractual cash flows in 4 years. And if for some reason we get to know that the investee is in a bankrupt situation or financial difficulty situations, without holding on to investment all along, we will sell the investment and collect the sales proceeds. Now, remember, we studied that in our previous videos. You deciding to sell the investment well before the maturity, when the credit quality of the investee deteriorates, does not contradict your business model objective, does not contradict. Now, as a simple example, you are planning to sit for the online exam, that is your objective, but just few days ahead of the exam you were sick. So, you decide to just give it up only for this time. You just deciding to give it up only for this time does not mean that you have completely quitted from the process of doing chartered exams. And your temporary decision to quit from the process of sitting for the exam this time does not contradict your whole object. Similarly, once in a way, depending on the investee status, we will decide to sell it to collect the sales proceeds, but it does not contradict your entire objective of collecting the contractual cash flows. As a result, it can be measured under amortized cost. So, that should be the answer for part B of question number 3, and then we are moving on to question number 4. Hydro PLC and Green Energy PLC are two leading hydropower generating companies. Extracts from the financial statements of each company for the financial year ended 31st March 2020 are listed in the table below. Hydro PLC and Green Energy PLC, revenue given, gross profit given, finance cost given, income tax given, profit before interest and tax is given, total assets given, equity given, long term borrowings given, number of ordinary shares given, market price per share given, dividends per share given. Required, calculate the following ratios for each company for the financial year ended 31st March 2020 based on the available information in the table given. First one, earnings per share, price earnings ratio, return on capital employed, dividends yield. Part B, discuss which company shares are most advantageous to purchase as an investor based on the ratios computed in A above. Let us do the calculations first. Hydro PLC, and this is Green Energy PLC. Earnings per share, profits to ordinary shareholders divided by weighted average number of ordinary shares. The profits given are not the profits to ordinary shareholders. 920 the profit before tax and interest will deduct the interest and tax. 320 minus 220 divided by the number of shares in issues, number of ordinary shares 840. Green PLC, Green Energy PLC, profit before interest and tax is 108 minus finance cost is 78 minus tax figure is 10 divided by the number of shares in issue. How many shares? 500. Next one, price earning ratio. Market price per share divided by earnings per share. Market price is given, market price per share is 5, and let me take the earnings per share after completing the previous calculation. Here the market price is 3.5. Return on capital employed, ROCE. We'll take the profit before tax and interest. This is profit before interest and tax divided by total assets minus current liabilities. Profit before interest and tax is given 920, total assets are given but the current liabilities are not given. So, as a result, we can use the other way. Take equity figure 3000 and plus non-current liabilities. Is it given? Long term borrowings are given 2007 into 100. And for Green Energy PLC, profit figure should be 108 divided by equity figure is 1250 plus long term borrowing 730. Dividend yield. Here dividend per share is not given, but total dividends are given. Total dividends are how much? Dividends divided by market price into 100. Per share calculation is not what is possible here, we will take the totals. Dividends paid 350, and let me take the total market value of the shares. Market price 5 rupee, how many shares in issue? Shares in issue 840. And here the dividends paid is 75, market price of the shares 3.5 into the number of shares in issue 500. So, let us work out the calculations now. To complete the calculations, 920 minus 320 minus 220 divided by 840 into 100, 45.2. 108 minus 78 minus 10 divided by 500 into I made a mistake here. 920 minus 320 minus 220 divided by 840, that is 0.45. 108 minus 78 minus 10 divided by 500, that is 0.04. Here let me bring the EPS 0.45, this is 0.04. 5 divided by 0.5, this is 11.1. 3.5 divided by 0.04, this is 87.5. 3.5 divided by 0.04. Then ROCE 920 divided by 5700 into 100, it is 16.1. 108 divided by this is 5.45. 350 divided by 8.3 dividend yield. Green Energy PLC 75 divided by 3.5 into 500, 4.2. Now part B, discuss which company shares are most advantageous to purchase as an investor based on the ratios computed in A above. Now, you need to look at it from an investor's perspective. If you were an investor to buy the shares of these two companies, which company would have been your most preferred choice? Now, earnings per share. So, what is the company whose shares earn the profit the most? That is company H. Company H earns 0.45 profits for each and every single share, whereas Green Energy earns only 0.04 profits for a single share. So, what is the company whose shares earns the profits the most? That is Hydro PLC. So, as far as EPS is concerned, if you buy a share, you should look first Hydro PLC shares, not Green Energy PLC shares. Then earnings per price earning ratio, and that is where a bit of a difference is. Price earning here is 11.1, here it is 7.5. What do you mean by the price earning ratio? Price earning ratio has different interpretations, but we can't explain, we have done it before in the previous webinar videos. What do you mean by the price earning? That shows how the shareholders kept their faith in the shares of the company. And if the shareholders rely more on the shares, they keep investing, they keep demanding our shares. The higher the demand for the shares, the higher the market price of a share. The higher the market price of a share, higher the price earning ratio. So, as a result, price earning ratio always shows the true potential and the prospect of a company in the future. Why? If the shareholders have a faith in our shares, they keep investing in our share capital, they keep demanding and they keep buying. So, the demand goes up and the price goes up, the price goes up, the higher the price earning ratio as well. So, that measures how reliable our shares are to the investors. That also shows what prospects the company has in the future from this price earning ratio. So, now as far as the price earning ratio is concerned, the true potential is shown from company G, not from company H, but it is not bad either. Even this is not bad. Rows. Company H generates 16 profit from every 100 rupee capital, whereas company G generates 5 rupees from every 100 rupee capital. So, which company has the strongest capital? Company H has the strongest capital. Why? Their output is bigger than the output of company G. Now, for you to have a return, it has to make profit, no? So, if you invest 100 rupees in company H, that will give you a return of 16. If you make 100 rupee investment in company G, that will give you only 5 rupee profit. So, as far as ROCE is concerned, still Hydro company is heading to company G. Dividend yield. Now, not that do all the companies pay all the profits as dividends, then there is no growth prospects to a company. It is like you earning and consuming. If you earn 1 million rupees a month, if you consume the entire 1 million rupees a month and there is no growth prospect for you. So, part of the earnings need to be consumed, the part of the earnings need to be invested elsewhere. So, likewise, not that does a company pay all their earnings in form of dividends, part of the profit will be kept in the company, part of the profits will be paid as dividends. Here they pay how much of dividends? 8.3. This is 4.28. For you to get the higher yield, you should make the investment not in company G, in company H. So, now if you look at all these aspects of EPS, price earning, ROAS and dividend yield, which company is heading, Hydro PLC is better, and that has to be your the preferred choice in making the investment rather than making the investment in company G. So, that has to be the answer for part B of question number 4. So, this is the answer given by CS Sri Lanka. Earnings per share, price earning ratio, return on capital employed, dividends yield, and let us look at the answer for part B as well. The price earning ratio is the ratio of a company's current share price to the earnings per share. A higher price earning ratio indicates strong shareholder confidence in the company and its future. Example, in profit growth, and a lower price earning ratio indicates lower confidence. However, higher price earning ratio of Green Energy PLC is a result of not having adequate earnings of the company. Return on capital employed is an indicative of the profitability of the company. Hydro PLC has returned 16.14 rupees for every 100 rupee invested compared to 5.45 rupees for every 100 rupee invested in Green Energy PLC. Shareholders look for both dividends yield and capital growth. Obviously, dividend yield is therefore an important aspect of shares performances. Hydro PLC has a higher dividend yield of 8.3 compared to the Green PLC 4.3. Since share performance of Hydro PLC is considerably higher than Green PLC. All things considered, Hydro PLC has better share performance compared to the Green Energy PLC, hence it will be advantageous to invest in shares of Hydro PLC when compared to Green Energy PLC. I just forgot to highlight one small point in my discussion. Price earning ratio. Though company G has a higher price earning ratio, please make sure that all what appears to be good will not be good sometimes, and this seems to be a bit ironical. What has made this price earning ratio higher? It is not because their market price is higher, that is because they have poor performances. This denominator is lower. Earnings per share is lower, as a result, the result will be bigger, and this is bit, misleading kind of an indication. It does not mean that the investors have confidence and faith in our shares. This is because earnings are down. So, that is what I should explain, and the best and the most preferred choice for investment should be Hydro, not Green PLC. We are now moving on to question number 5.